Hi, and thanks for logging on to the Daily DVAR Halacha. And here's a brand new halacha for you, and it's for Monday, the 8th day of May, the 12th day of Iyar. Here we go. Today we're going to discuss, again in some koshering situations in your home, the oven and baking things in the oven. If you could possibly arrange it, it would be fantastic if all of us could have a separate oven for meat and a separate oven for dairy. Not all of us manage to be able to arrange that. We don't have it in our kitchen, but if you could arrange it, it would be beautiful. It would certainly avoid a lot of the problems that we're about to discuss right now. Second best, you could also try to arrange this. Use your oven mostly for meat, and then have a small little convection oven that you use for heating up dairy. You don't have to do this. It's just a great thing to do if you can manage it, because it'll avoid all problems. If you do have to use the same oven for milk items and meat items, then here are the guidelines you have to watch for. First of all, meat liquid and dairy liquid, if you want to have them in the same oven at the same time, they would both have to be covered, and you'd have to be certain that the two pots are not touching each other. That's if you're putting in meat liquid and dairy liquid. Make certain that they're both covered and that they're not touching each other. The two pots are not touching each other. Certainly you can't put one of them on top of the other one, because drips happen during the cooking, and the drips of the one could end up in the other, and we don't want that. You can't roast meat and dairy at the same time. They must be covered, or certainly you're going to want to have at least one of them covered. Best to cover both of them, and that's because some say that even smell is almost considered like a substance, and if you're roasting meat, there's that meat smell throughout the oven, which is considered to be in some ways of substance, and it's going to go into the dairy food. So cover both would be best. Cover at least one. The Lavush says if you covered one of them, then that would be enough to be considered like it blocked the smell from going from one to the other. But you can't put one on top of the other, because again, then you would have to worry about drips. Steam is also considered like it's a substance, it's something. So if there's steam from a meat dish floating all around the oven, it's like there's meat floating all around the oven. So you have to worry about that situation too. If you want to do them one after the other, this is, again, for all of us people stuck with one oven, then you can use them one after the other. In other words, cook your chicken in the oven, get the chicken out, and then you want to make something else in there that's dairy, you could, but you'd have to make certain that all the residue of the meat from, that was on the racks and everything is removed before you put your cheese pan or something into that same spot in the oven. You must remove the residue from the previous thing if you want to cook meat in there and then later cook dairy in there. Dry foods or covered liquids are allowed. So that means if you have an oven and you're stuck using your oven for chicken and for dairy, for meat and for dairy, then dry foods are allowed. Because they don't splatter and they don't do so much bad, and liquid foods have to be covered in order to allow you to use the same oven back and forth for meat and dairy without like a full koshering in between. If you did cook inside of your oven two uncovered items at the same time, or one immediately after the other, then you should talk to a rabbi about the permissibility of that food. Let me repeat that. If you did end up cooking two uncovered items, one meat and one dairy, at the same time in the same oven, or one immediately after the other, you should speak to a rabbi to clarify before you proceed about whether you can eat those foods. Okay, so again, let's summarize. Don't get any wrong statements from here. You don't have to have a dairy oven and a meat oven. It would just be so wonderful if you could arrange it, because then all these things you wouldn't have to watch for. For us people stuck with one oven, then you do have to be careful with not having them splatter on each other, not having the smells and the steams go from one to the other, and certainly if they're in there at the same time, best to cover them and things like that. That's what we're learning tonight. Please be careful about this if you're using one oven for meat and for dairy. Thanks for logging on, and log on again tomorrow for more. Bye-bye.